This will be the Kings. But before we get there, we'll just do a quick overview of the Old Testament, the entire Old Testament, and then a quick intro to the New Testament, and that'll set the stage for the story of the Kings. The Old Testament covers about 4,000 years of history, so there's a lot in there. The New Testament, in contrast, covers about, how long would you think the New Testament covers? 150 years. Big difference between the Old Testament and the New. That's why the Old Testament is so much bigger. However, you're going to get more information in the Old than you do the New. The Old Testament, of course, is God leading his chosen people and chosen leader through to a chosen parcel of ground. That's the whole story. It begins, the first 11 chapters of the Old Testament cover how much time? 2,000 years. So, for the first 11 chapters, you've got 2,000 years, and then from that chapter 12 on is 2,000 years. So that's a whole lot of information, or a whole missed information in the first 11. You're not given a whole bunch of information on the first 2,000 years. Just what you absolutely need to know. The first 11 chapters covers 2,000 years, and this is basically prehistory, meaning pre-Israel, before Israel, before God calls out a person to begin the nation. Then the rest of the 2,000 years from Genesis 12 to the end of Malachi, you can break up into 500-year increments. These 500-year increments help you remember what's going on, what the time period is, how all that fits in. So here we go. There's a way to remember these 500-year increments. You can remember the first 500 year as election. God chooses someone. Exodus, empire, and exile. Those will break up the 500-year increments. Now, it's not 500 exactly, but we're going to use round numbers here. It's approximately 500. You can further define it by an event. In each of these time periods, something major happens that you can stamp in your mind when that time period is happening. The first one, election, is Abraham. Abraham is chosen. That begins the nation of Israel. That was the election. The Exodus, of course, that event is the Exodus, them leaving Egypt. And the empire, of course, is the kingdom. And the exile is the kingdom lost. You can also remember it by a person. A person is going to show up and be prominent in each age. For the first time period under election, the person that's prominent, of course, is Abraham, of course, because he's the one who starts it all. He's the patriarch, Abraham to Joseph. And then you'll get Abraham, takes you through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And that time period is really still pre-Israel. There's no nation solidified yet. Now you do get the 12 tribes, the sons of Jacob, sons of Israel. However, it's not really set in stone as a nation because they've been serving a nation. Then we've got the next time period is Moses, the patriarch. He's a prophet. He and a lot of what Moses has to say is prophecy about the millennium. It's way future. So he's a prophet. He begins the prophets. The Bible records that information from Genesis 12 to Genesis 50, basically the rest of the book of Genesis. And you've got the pilgrimage that happens, and that'll be the 1500 to about 1000. And then from 1,000 on, you get the kingdom. From 1,000 to 500, you get the kingdom. The kingdom, of course, makes its prominence with David, although the first one on the throne is not David, it's Saul. But the kingdom is what Israel has been after from the beginning. In Exodus chapter 16, verse 31, God has always intended Israel to be a kingdom. In Exodus 16:31, you find some interesting wording. Exodus 16:31. It says, "And the house of Israel called the name thereof manna." So when this bread came down from the sky, they said, "What do we call this?" The people talking, he said, were the house of Israel. That's what you call a royal family, the house of whatever. So right from the beginning, Israel is being set up as a kingdom. Again, in chapter 19, verse 6, God tells them their purpose. In chapter 19, verse 6, "And ye shall be unto me a kingdom," as in kings, "a kingdom of priests and an holy nation." They aren't nomads just out there wandering. God has a purpose for them. And then I've advanced the slide too fast. After David, you've got Solomon. After Solomon, the kingdom busts up, and that shows the demise of the kingdom. Its highest plateau is under David. David was the prince of the kings, and then it quickly goes downhill. That'll be found in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and then the writings of the kings, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. And then they have to pay for sins. When they are exiled, it's not by choice, and it's not by the other nations becoming powerful. It's by God exiling them, God punishing them. And that is, Israel's history can be broken up into 3 stages after Solomon. The book is either referring to before the exile, after the exile, or before the exile, prophesying it. So the 3 stages, present, past, or future. The before exile, here's the books: Isaiah, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. All of those are pre-exile, but they tell you about it coming. During the exile, the books that are covered during the exile: Daniel, Jeremiah, Lamentations, and Ezekiel. All of those are while the nations are in exile. They're sitting down there writing those books. So when you read through those books and you wonder, when's this happening, what's going on here, you'll know it's while they're in exile, or before it, or maybe they've just finished it. The after exile is Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. This is a bunch of boring facts. However, those boring facts become real interesting once you start reading it. When you'll find yourself in one of those minor prophets and you'll be scratching your head saying, what's he talking about? When did this happen? Okay, then go to your list here and you can find out when it happened. The other interesting thing we find is that in the history we've been given, there are gaps. There's gaps of time. There are about 400 years each in these gaps, and they're silent years. They're years where God quits talking. That's a scary thing. When God quits talking to a person, you better get scared. The 2 gaps of about 400 years of silence. The first 400 years of silence is between the patriarchs and the Exodus from Egypt. That's the time that they're in Egypt before God calls them out. It's basically just they're there. They're slaves. They've been working. They've been having children. We don't know what's going on. It's silent. The next 400 years of silence occurs after Israel's return from captivity, and that'll be between the Old Testament and the New. You have a silent period of time. You don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden Jesus shows up. In the New Testament, of course, is the story of the silence being broken. Jesus Christ shows up. And he's the Messiah. Jesus, that's him coming for the nation. He's not just coming for the world and, hey, look how great I am. No, he's coming for a nation. He's been setting this whole thing up all along. Now when the silence is broken, it's broken for a reason. The real king is here. The next thing we'll see is the pinnacle of the nation of Israel was David. For years and years, they've been trying to get to this kingdom set up. And finally, with David, they got it. Then it took them, from start to finish, it took them 1,000 years to get David on the throne. That's the peak of their performance, is David. And it took them, guess how long, to destroy themselves? 500 years. In 500 years, they destroy what was built in 1,000. So that tells you something about how long God takes to build a kingdom. How long does he take? 1,000 years. So, when he's ready to do it again, guess how long he's going to take? 1 millennium. The millennium will be God setting up a kingdom. Takes him 1,000 years. He's already proved it once. And then that will be more of the New Testament, but we're going to deal with the Old Testament and how all of this took place and who the kings are and how they came to be and what their claim to fame or not fame ended up being. All right, the first king we know about is Saul. We know of others, but the first prominent king of Israel is Saul. At this point, Israel as a nation is united. They're one. They're a single force. And he rules for 40 years. They basically get his information in 1 Samuel. The next king, the good one, is David. David rules for 40 years. His information is basically in 2 Samuel. Then the last real good king is Solomon. And I say good, that's tongue-in-cheek. He starts good, but he sure doesn't end good. Solomon, he reigns 40 years. All of these three kings are 40 years apiece. And he'll be from 1 Kings chapter 1 to chapter 10. Then the kingdom has trouble. The kingdom divides. This division is basically Israel and Judah. Judah is the southern 2 tribes, and Israel the northern 10 kings. Now, as far as timelines, I don't put a whole bunch of stock in putting an actual date on something, because you start getting in trouble with the dates matching or not matching, and God saying it takes this many years and your dates didn't add up. So these are approximate dates, and you can take them or leave them. But basically, it's 930 B.C. to 722 B.C. That's the time period we're talking about. In 723 to 722. In 1 Kings 11, verse 31. 1 Kings 11, verse 31. Solomon's son is the first guy on the scene. And he should take the throne, and that's what you expect. The son of whoever was king becomes king. However, the story doesn't go that way. In 1 Kings 11:31, and he said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hands of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. Okay, so the kingdom's going to be rent. It's going to be a divided kingdom. The southern kingdom is Judah. It's got 2 tribes. You find that in 1 Kings 12, verse 21. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin. There's the 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. Now it's interesting to note, up to now, the kings had only come from 2 tribes out of Israel. Saul was from what tribe? Benjamin. And David is from Judah. So when it comes time for a split, the 2 southern kingdoms that hold together are the 2 kingdoms who had produced kings. Now, I don't know that maybe there was some rivalry there and one thought, maybe this will be my chance to get back on the throne. I don't know. But those 2 tribes stuck together. In Judah, all the kings were descendants of David through Solomon. And you'll find that in 1 Kings 11, 31 to 32. And he said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, and the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. You see, God's got a very special eye on a plot of land in a city. That actual spot of ground means something very special to God. And he keeps his eye on it, and he does things not for Israel's sake per se, but because of the land over there. He said, I'm going to keep the heathen off of it, and because I want to set something up special on that spot, I'm going to put a placeholder. It's going to be Judah and Benjamin. And he did that for a while. The divided kingdom. We have Judah, the 2 southern tribes. Israel, of course, is the 10 northern tribes. And what we find is war. War, civil war for 80 years. You find that in 1 Kings 12 to 16. The southern and northern go at it, because that's what kings do. A king isn't content with being in one spot. He's got to get more and get more. All kings have. Then we have peace for 80 years. The peace is found in 1 Kings 16 to 2 Kings 10. Now, the interesting thing to note about this is when the peace happens, there's a man of God connected. There's some speech from heaven saying, clean this up, clean that up. If we'll obey God, we'll get peace. That's the only way you can get peace. Man without God does not achieve peace. That'll be 1 Kings 17 to 2 Kings 2, and 1 Kings 9 to 2 Kings 9. Now, Elijah and Elisha are the main spokesmen. Now, I'm saying peace. I don't mean there wasn't some kind of turmoil going on, but I mean peace as far as the north wasn't fighting the south, and the south wasn't trying to steal something from the north. In that area, they did have peace. Now, they didn't have much peace anywhere else, but then they have war again for 50 years. That'll be in 2 Kings 11 to chapter 17. Then Israel, the northern kingdom, goes into captivity. They go to Assyria. That'll be supposedly 722 or 721 BC. And you can correct the historians if they got their date wrong. Judah, of course, is all by themselves. When Israel, the 10 northern kingdoms, or the 10 northern kingdom is taken into captivity, the southern kingdom is all alone. Now they don't have a brother out there. They're all by themselves. They are Judah, and they become Judah. So the Israelites of the 10 northern kingdoms are dispersed. They're no more. They're captives. They're slaves. However, what retains its heritage is Judah. So when we refer to an Israelite, it's no longer a Hebrew. It's a Jew, Judah. And they'll last for another 135 years on their own, all by themselves. And that's in 2 Kings 18 to chapter 25. Then eventually, they've made God mad enough that he sends them into captivity. Judah goes to Babylon in 586 to 587 BC. And this will be the story of how those kings come to power and lose power. Quickly, I'll run through this. This is the most confusing thing you'll ever sit down and try to figure out. Who is king and who's the other king, and when's it happen and when's it not happen? Okay, we know the first kings happened at the same time. Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And I've got it laid out there with Judah on the left and Israel on the right. And there's the approximate dates they're ruling. Now, while Jeroboam is still king, the kingdom switches hands quickly. Abijah comes to the throne while Jeroboam is still reigning. Then Asa, while Jeroboam is still reigning. Then Nadab replaces Jeroboam. Then Baasha replaces Nadab while Asa is still reigning. See how confusing this gets? Then Baasha. Then Elah in Israel takes the throne. Then Zimri. Then Tibni. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Then Omri. Omri's he starts the real bad thing. Now, I'll put in here in a different color, see the blue there? The blue is showing you that there is a co-regency, or someone else is reigning at the same time. So Omri begins his reign, but he's not reigning alone. He begins his reign in 884. However, he doesn't begin the reign on his own until 880. Then we have Ahab. Ahab is a famous, not for a good reason, but famous king, a famous wicked king. And shortly later, we have Jehoshaphat come in, and they're reigning pretty much the same time frames, and you see a lot of stories back and forth between these two. Jehoshaphat is the same way. He doesn't take the throne alone until 869. Then we have Joram and that guy, Ahaziah, that guy, anyway. And then you got Joram in the south. So see, this gets real confusing because there's a Joram in the north and a Joram in the south. And they're reigning during the same era. So it can get confusing if you're not paying close attention. Then Ahaziah takes over in the south. Then Jehu. You know the story of Jehu. Jehu will be a good king for a little while in the north. And then Athaliah. This is actually a queen. She's not a king, but she has a short-lived run, and then she's taken care of. Then you have Joash, Jehoahaz, and it goes and goes and goes. And if you want all of this information, you can get it on the video if I ever finish it, and slow it down. I'm just going to breeze through it fast. But here's how you can see how they stagger. And that's one thing that makes it hard to keep up with, is because it'd be easy for us to keep up with it if they all ruled 10 years apiece. And they started and stopped at the same time, but they don't. And if they had separate names, but sometimes they used the same names. So there's where we are. All right, then we have Israel all by themselves and the kings that follow there. And I'm flying through this fast, and we'll get to our first king. The first king, after Solomon dies, is Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Rehoboam should have been king over all of it. But because of Solomon's wickedness, God said, I'm not going to allow this thing to last like it has. I told Solomon if he would obey my voice, then I would preserve his kingdom, but he has not done it. So because he did not obey the voice of God, God said, I'm rending the kingdom from your hand, and I'm going to give it to somebody. Who does he give it to? Anybody know? It's right there on the page. Jeroboam. That's right, Jeroboam. Now, who is Jeroboam? Anybody know just off the top of your head? Jeroboam. What's his claim to fame? How does he get the throne? Why would God pick Jeroboam to give him the throne? You know, of all the men in Israel, God could have chose anybody. Why did he pick this guy, Jeroboam? Obviously, he was doing something right, because God picked him. And God made some good promises to him. He says, if you'll hold up your bargain, I'll be good to you. Now, he didn't, but he could have. Um, the reason he's chosen, we'll get to in a minute, but I'll let y'all think on that as we go. Rehoboam, he's taken the throne, and of course every king, every president, every whatever has to pick out their own officers. They've got to choose their cabinet, and they've got to choose who's going to run this country and what the new policies are going to be. Well, we know the story of Rehoboam. He gets together with his buddies, and he says, hey guys, how do we want to get, this is our time. We can get anything we want. And the old men, the advisors, who are supposed to be advising the king, have some advice for him. The old men say, hey, Solomon's been pretty hard on these people. They're wore out. They're tired of it. If you'll be nice to them, they'll love you as king. The young men say, I don't worry about all that garbage. They just need to toughen up. They need to pay us and do us. This is our time to make money. Solomon already made a bunch. We're going to make ours now. So in 1 Kings 12, verse 11, he finally gives them his verdict on the situation. He says, here's how I plan to run this country. 1 Kings 12, verse 11. This is Rehoboam. Now, whereas my father did lade you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father hath chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. You just thought you had it rough. Wait till I get in charge. Once we get things swinging around here, you'll wish for the day Solomon was over you. Well, that was bad news. The problem with any leader is they need wisdom. And he didn't go to where there was wisdom. Where he went was the young men, the people his age. You also notice he didn't go to the Lord with it. He didn't go to a prophet. He didn't go to a priest. He didn't say, let's seek counsel from God. He just did it on his own. Now, he should have known his history. Had he known the history, like Israel is supposed to know, he would have seen this. Exodus chapter 1. Exodus chapter 1. Here's another king, a heathen king, and he's trying to make the same choice. What do we do about these people? This king happens to be Pharaoh, and he's dealing with how do we handle all of these Israelites. Exodus 1, verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them. Wisdom. Okay, there's two types of wisdom. There's God's wisdom and man's wisdom. Pharaoh's saying, let's make sure we do this wisely, lest they multiply and it come to pass that when there fall out any war, they join also our enemies and fight against us, so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. He said, here's what I'll do about it. The same thing Rehoboam did. I'll afflict them. I'll put them in bondage. Okay? It didn't work for Pharaoh. Why did Rehoboam think it's going to work for him? Because he didn't get real wisdom. He got man's wisdom. There's such a thing as man's wisdom. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. First Corinthians 1, verse 19. It says, for it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Okay, he's talking about wise men here and prudent men according to the world's standards. God says, I'll turn it out to be nothing. You'll look at it and laugh one day. Verse 20. Where's the wise? Where's the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? Okay, you start looking for worldly wisdom, you get it. It turns into nothing. Verse 21. For after that in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom, worldly wisdom, knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believed. Had Rehoboam run to a preacher to get wisdom, we would have had a different story. But we don't. He went to young boys. Jeroboam. Jeroboam gets the throne in the north. And he's got what should have been the united kingdom that would have been inherited by Rehoboam had it not been for Solomon. Rehoboam is king. He's found in 1 Kings 11, verse 26. 1 Kings 11:26. Jeroboam the servant to a king. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite of Zered, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zerah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. Okay, so Jeroboam is a servant. So there must have been something God looked down and said, I like the way that guy's serving. I'll call him out. So he's a servant to Solomon. That's why God chose him. So it doesn't matter if you're a servant. Do it wisely and God will promote you. There's nothing wrong with that. Do it the way you're supposed to do and God will give you credit for it when it's time. Notice also there, does he come from a prestigious family? No, some widow. Bunch of nobodies. And God pulled him up. God likes to use nobodies. So don't think you have to have some history of being a great Christian for 95 years before you can do anything for God. No, start now. And realize you're a nobody. And he'll take note of it. The somebodies, he turns into nobodies. And the nobodies, he makes somebody. And you'll find that again in 1 Kings 11:11, where he's saying, I'll rend the kingdom. His position under Solomon. What did he do under Solomon as this servant? You know, there's a lot of servants. Solomon had just about everybody make some sort of a service to him. And that's what kings do. Kings make everybody serve some way, so they're busy building their kingdom. In 1 Kings 11, verse 27. 1 Kings 11:27. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king Solomon and built this was the cause he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo and repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man, that he was industrious, made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. So he's put him in charge here. And what's probably happening is what happens when somebody gets in charge. They start knowing all the details. So they start seeing, Solomon is doing that? Well, it doesn't make sense. These numbers aren't adding up. So he sees all of the crookedness that's going on here. And he's put him in charge of, he would be like the head accountant. He's keeping the books. He's doing all the numbers for him. And something made him mad there. He says, hey, Solomon is not running this thing right. And at this time in his life, he's righteous. He's serving as a servant should, and he's not bucking the system. He's doing it according to what God chose him to do, and God chooses him. Now, that's not to say God never has you buck the system. He does have you buck the system. But it's never when we want to do it. Yeah, right. His charge, Ahijah, the prophet, shows up. Ahijah, the prophet, shows up, and he tells him, look, you can reign, and I'm going to let you have the kingdom. However, there's rules to it. Just because you're king doesn't mean that you're supreme. And that's what kings have always thought. I'm king supreme. You view me as your Lord, and you bow to me. Well, God doesn't view it that way. And you get in trouble when you start to view it that way. In 1 Kings 11, verse 37, he says, and I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desirest, and shalt be king over Israel. And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and wilt walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did. God didn't call him a king, he called him a servant. That I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel unto thee. And I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. Okay, he says, it's up to you, buddy. I'm putting the house of David on timeout. Now, I've made some promises I'm not going to go back on. It's not going to be forever. However, if you want to shine during your time, here's how you do it. Just do what I say. Go back to what David did. Start patterning your life after him. But he didn't do it. He has trouble. His trouble begins in chapter 11, verse 40. 1 Kings 11, 40.
He didn't even make it out of chapter 11.
His trouble starts way early. And Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. And Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt, unto Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. He immediately buddies up with the wrong crowd.
He should have went to Ziklag.
Yeah.
Just like David did.
Just stayed right where he was, hunkered down. But that's what we do. We get some command that God says, hey, look, I'm gonna set you up. I'm going to bust this thing up one day, and I'm going to set you in the right spot. And it doesn't happen fast enough. They didn't come put him on the throne immediately. He still had to put up with Solomon's nonsense. So what's he do? The easy way out. I'll run down there to Egypt. I can be the big wig down there. And he goes down to Egypt. Now, we see some other issues with him as a person. Chapter 12, verse 1. He's a compromiser. Well, we knew that from him running to Egypt. You can't run to Egypt and not be a compromiser. But in chapter 12, verse 1, and Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. And it came to pass, when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of King Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, that they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spake unto Rehoboam, saying, thy father made our so forth, so on, heavy, you make it light. He's trying to negotiate with the other king. He should have said, I've already gotten a charge from God. I'm supposed to take a throne. But no, he's trying to put himself in servitude to another king. What? Why is he trying to get in bed with the other king after God's already told him, I'm rending this thing apart. 10 of the tribes are going to you. He should have walked in there boldly and said, no, sir. God said, I'm taking 10. I'm setting up right here. Y'all sort it out. Figure out who's staying, who's leaving. But he didn't. So he has a rough beginning. Rehoboam prepares to fight Israel with the help of Benjamin. Well, that's what you do. I mean, if the kingdom splits up, don't just let it split up. Go beat somebody up. So that's what his plan is. He's going to get together with Benjamin, his other tribe, and they're going to go take out vengeance. But not so fast. 1 Kings 12:21. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin, and 180,000 chosen men, which were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. Okay, we're going to get this thing back. We're going to do what, how dare they tell me no? I told them I'm going to beat them with scorpions. How dare they run? Well, he decides he's got a good battle plan, but then something happens. Somebody says, no, go. You can't do that. God's not going to allow you to. God intervenes in the affairs of nations. He does. While he may or may not intervene in peons' lives, There's no doubt his hand is moving kings. His hand is in government. He's setting up and he's taking down. He's the one that does that. It doesn't matter what we vote or don't vote. He's the one behind it. Now, we should do our diligence. I'm not saying that. But you can count on it. He's the one that sets one up and takes one down. And 2 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 1. 2 Chronicles 11, verse 1. Second Chronicles 11, verse 1. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he gathered of the house of Judah and Benjamin 180,000 chosen men, which were warriors, to fight against Israel, that he might bring the kingdom again unto Rehoboam. But the word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, Speak unto Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and all of Israel in Judah and Benjamin, saying, Thus saith the Lord. Somebody's got a little more power than the king. When the Lord can say, when someone can come down and say, no, sir, okay, king, put it on hold. They're really the king. God's the king, period. Even in China, God's still the king.
That's right.
North Korea, God's still the king. Ye shall not go up, nor fight against your brethren. Return every man to his house, for this thing is done of me. And they obeyed the words of the Lord and returned from going against Jeroboam. Now God just gave him a rebuke. He said this thing, the thing he's talking about, is the mutiny. The 10 tribes leaving. God says, nah, leave that alone. I did that. Ouch. Talk about a rebuke. That was a rebuke. But the great thing is he obeyed. He heeded the warning. He didn't go to fight. Well, what's a good thing to do if you're not fighting? Well, if you're not fighting, you need to be preparing to fight. So he does that. He prepares his land and he builds cities and he sets things up. And you'll find all that information in 2 Chronicles 11, 5 to 12. And you'll see it's just one list of cities after the next. Rehoboam, meanwhile, in the north, Jeroboam, I'm going to get these names all mixed up. Jeroboam in the north is seeking security and popularity. That's what he wants to do. Okay, but he doesn't need to. He's already got 10 tribes. Other guys only got 2. But no, this is a ego trip. He's on now that's kind of typical of world leaders. To a degree, they're all on an ego trip. You know, they want to know what the popularity poll is. And there was no need for it when you're a king. It doesn't matter if you're popular. You're king. You cut the head off or not. But he's going to seek popularity. In 1 Kings 12, verse 26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now shall the kingdom return into the house of David. If this people go to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, not my Lord, or our Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Let me just make this simple for you. Behold, thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. He hadn't learned anything from history at all. Verse 29. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other put he in Dan. So he's got a mega satellite church. He's got one in Bethel and one in Dan.
He spent too much time in Egypt.
Yeah, he did spend too much time in Egypt. Verse 30. This thing became a sin. For the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. And he made an house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. He said, we're going to make new rules. Let's make this thing all-inclusive, interdenominational. Everybody can be king, everybody can be priest, everybody can be, and, we'll put up some golden calves here, and we'll We'll just make this thing fun and popular. But, as always, when sin pops up, at some point, the finger of God pops out. God always has something to say when man gets involved in sin. At some point, God pricks the conscience with his word. He'll have somebody or something in your path. If a man goes to hell, he goes against the will of God.
That's right.
Because God is giving him many chances and many stop signs saying, don't go that way. A man has to ignore God to get involved in sin.
That's right.
Here's his warning. He gets a missionary visit from a prophet out of Judah. This is in the southern kingdom. Remember, in the northern kingdom, the Levites are probably not feeling too welcomed. Their position has been taken over by anybody who wants to go worship the golden calves. So what do? They flee south. So right here we start seeing the spiritual switch. Anybody with any mind for God is moving south. That's why I live in Florida. No. The spiritual people are moving south, and the carnal is moving north. Kind of like it is in America. No. So he's going to get a prophet. Somebody's going to put their finger in his face and say, no, sir, sin doesn't pay. But they've got to come from the south because he's insulated himself with a bunch of yes men. So from the south, here they come. 1 Kings chapter 13. 1 Kings 13. Has to be in chapter 13. Verse 1. And behold, there came a man of God out of Judah by the word of the Lord unto Bethel. And Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. Okay, you know the story here. He's going to burn incense on this altar, and this guy's going to tell him no go. Verse 2. And he cried against the altar in the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, behold, a child shall be born unto thee, unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priest of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burned upon thee. And he gave a sign the same day, saying, This is the sign which the Lord hath spoken. Behold, the altar shall be rent, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out. And it came to pass, when the king Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of God, which he cried against the altar in Bethel, that he put forth his hand from the altar, saying, Lay hold on him. He didn't get convicted. He says, no, let's shut him up. You know, the thing I've been doing by building the high places and putting out, new gods and making all these other people priests, that was all done. It was a lot of effort put in to shutting up God. That was his whole desire. Now a man shows up, a missionary from the south, and he's preaching, and he didn't want to hear it. He's already proved he doesn't want to hear it. So what's he do? He puts his finger right back in his face, and he says, you shut up. Let's see what God thinks of that. And his hand which he put forth against him dried up, so that he could not pull it again unto him. And the altar also was rent, and the ashes poured out from the altar according to the sign of the man of God, which the man of God had given by the word of the Lord. And the king answered and said unto the man of God, Entreat now the face of the Lord thy God. Okay, he said two things here. It's not my God, but it's your God. And your God is the one that can do something. He didn't say, call me one of my priests over here and have him go offer some ashes to, the new calf we just built. He knew that wasn't going to do anything. There's no power in that. So the man who just rebuked him, he says, hey, I need you to pray to God. That's where the power is. They know it. And pray for me, that my hand may be restored me again. And the man of God besought the Lord, and the king's hand was restored unto him again, and became as it was before. And the king said unto the man of God, Come home with me, and refresh thyself, and I will give thee a reward. He's trying every trick in the book. If you can't beat them, join them. That's his philosophy. His philosophy is, hey, look, I know I've been wicked, and you just proved it to everybody, and God did a miraculous sign to prove to everybody that he's right and I'm wrong. Now let's do something tricky here. Come join me, and all the people will suddenly think all is forgiven and all is well. And that's what the world does. The world will say, okay, you exposed that we're a bunch of wicked sinners. Okay, but we're having a party tomorrow night, and you're invited. We don't hold any grudges. Don't get involved in that. Stay away from it. Now, he was big. He had already done that himself when he went to Egypt. He went down there to party with the wrong crowd. We see it in verse 8. And the man of God said unto the king, If thou wilt give me half thine house, I will not go in with thee, neither will I eat bread nor drink water in this place. For so it was charged me by the word of the Lord, saying, Eat no bread, nor drink water, nor turn again by the same way that thou camest. So he went another way, and returned not by the way that he came to Bethel. And then we get an interesting story after that, but that's not dealing with kings, so I'm going to skip it. Yes, he gets tricked. He gets tricked by an old prophet. An old prophet. Now, you've got to wonder, and when you're reading that story, remember, he was from the south. He went to the north to preach against it with a message. He had to go because there wasn't somebody up north to preach. God called him because there wasn't a preacher up there. Then, as he's leaving, an old prophet says, Hey, I'm a prophet just like you. We'd be brothers. Well, if they were brothers, how come God didn't use him? He was wicked. He didn't flee when wickedness was taken over. He stayed. So he wasn't so hot to begin with. All right, we better stop it there. And we are on, I don't know, remind me, we're on Jeroboam point C. Jeroboam point C.